The stars above Valeri Prime shone peacefully, as if unaware of the chaos unfolding below. Valeri Prime had always been known for its beauty, crystal blue oceans, floating cities, and a gentle people who valued knowledge over power. But peace shattered like glass when the sky darkened with the arrival of the Shroud Swarm. No warning, no message, just silence, followed by terror. Black shapes descended, living machines or beasts or both, and within hours, the defense systems of Valeri Prime fell. Entire cities vanished under writhing clouds of biomechanical horrors. The Valeri, brilliant scientists and philosophers, were helpless in the face of such raw destruction. They did what little they could: activated every emergency beacon, transmitted SOS messages across all known frequencies, and begged the Galactic Union for help. Across the stars, the message was heard clearly. This is Valeri Prime. We are under attack. Civilian casualties rising. Requesting immediate aid. Coordinates attached. But the galaxy, full of advanced species and powerful fleets, remained silent. Some governments hesitated, citing treaties. Others feared the Shroud Swarm, remembering old records of its brutality. A few simply chose not to act, reasoning that Valeri Prime was too far or already doomed. So the messages drifted in space, growing fainter each hour, buried under bureaucracy and fear. On a forgotten edge of Union territory, however, one of the signals reached an old listening post, an Earth outpost marked inactive in most Union databases. Inside, a small crew of humans operated under minimal protocols, mostly monitoring radiation levels and space debris. But when the signal came through, it didn't go ignored. A gruff voice, deep with age and command, called out, "Play back that last one." Captain Elias Ward listened closely. His face was marked with scars, not just physical, but emotional, from years of war. Unlike most humans in the galaxy, Ward had seen firsthand how fragile peace could be. As the message played again, static laced with fear, he said nothing for a long moment. Then he stood. "Get me the Resolute's crew. Full alert. We're going." The officer beside him blinked. "Sir? That's not our mission. We haven't been cleared by Ward." Cut him off. "I don't care who's cleared what. A civilization is dying, and the Union is doing nothing. But we're not the Union. We're Deathworlders." The word carried weight. To most species, Earth was a nightmare: hostile wildlife, extreme weather, diseases, and predators. No other intelligent life should have evolved there. But it had. And the beings it produced, humans, were known for their resilience, stubbornness, and the terrifying ability to adapt to almost anything. Ward's crew was small, but every member was trained for survival, combat, and the kind of missions others wouldn't dare attempt. Within hours, the Starship Resolute was powered up. Its hull bore battle scars from previous campaigns, and inside, soldiers checked weapons, ran system diagnostics, and said quiet goodbyes to messages that might never be sent. In the command center, Ward studied the last known scans of Valeri Prime. "It's bad," his second-in-command, Lieutenant Kira Dane, said. "That swarm's not random. It's targeting infrastructure first. Classic method for planetary control." Ward nodded. "And no one's helping them." "No one but us," she said. "Exactly," he replied. As the ship tore through hyperspace, tensions ran high. Everyone had seen reports of the Shroud Swarm. Some believed they were old weapons from a long-dead civilization. Others thought they were living organisms connected by a hive mind. Either way, they destroyed everything in their path. Some worlds had fallen in hours, others in days. Very few had survived at all. When the Resolute dropped out of hyperspace, Valeri Prime was burning. Great columns of smoke rose into space. The orbital defense ring was shattered, pieces drifting like ash. The crew watched in silence. Then Ward spoke. "All hands, prepare for descent. We find survivors. We hit the swarm if we can. No heroics unless they save lives." The shuttle touched down in what remained of a Valeri city, now a wreck of broken towers and scorched streets. Fires burned unchecked. Strange creatures skittered across rooftops, their eyes glowing. But through the debris, faint life signs flickered. The team moved quickly, using motion sensors and drones. They found a group of Valeri hiding in an underground library, huddled around old databanks. One of them, a young scientist named Relin Vos, stared at the humans with disbelief. "You came," he whispered. "Everyone else. They ignored us." Ward knelt beside him. "We don't ignore people in trouble. Not now. Not ever." At that moment, an eerie howl echoed through the ruins. The swarm had noticed them. Ward stood and raised his weapon. Time to show these things what Deathworlders are made of. As the first wave of attackers approached, the humans held their ground, the fight for Valeri Prime just beginning. The sky over Valeri Prime glowed with orange fire as the swarm continued its brutal march, tearing through the once glorious cities without mercy, consuming technology, memories, and lives, while thick clouds of smoke rose from the ruins of ancient spires and cultural centers that had stood for centuries. Deep beneath the rubble, survivors clung to life, hiding in tunnels, collapsed buildings, and forgotten shelters, barely breathing, terrified that any sound might bring the monsters to them. But above all this horror, in the thick chaos of a dying world, a new sound echoed from the sky, low and rumbling, mechanical and powerful, unlike anything the swarm had ever heard before, as the human dropship roared through the burning atmosphere and descended like a steel bird of prey, engines screaming as it pushed gravity aside, carrying with it soldiers who had been born on a world that trained them to fight not only enemies, but nature itself. Captain Elias Ward stood at the front of the troop bay, helmet tucked under one arm, face grim but eyes sharp, as he looked around at the men and women of the Resolute Strike Team, each of them dressed in adaptive armor, gear slung over their backs, weapons charged and ready, their faces silent but focused because they knew what was waiting for them down there: death, danger, and creatures no one fully understood. But it didn't matter, because they were Deathworlders, and they were here not for conquest or politics, but for a simple reason: someone asked for help and was ignored, and they had decided that was not acceptable. The dropship slammed into the landing zone hard, shaking the walls as hatches burst open and the team poured out, spreading into formation, scanning the surroundings, weapons raised, while the ruins of Valari's central district stretched out before them, once a beautiful square of shining white stone and glowing fountains, now a blackened graveyard covered in ash and corpses. Lieutenant Kira Dane led the first unit forward, her eyes darting over her visor's readings as they pushed into the city. And soon they reached the underground library where the first survivors had been found: Valeri scientists, teachers, even children, all trembling, exhausted, barely alive. And when they saw the humans, again, their eyes filled with tears, not of fear, but of hope, because for the first time in days, someone had come back for them. Relin Vos, the young Valeri who had first spoken to Captain Ward, limped forward, still weak but stronger than before, and said in his soft voice, "More are hiding under the Academy dome, beneath the hydro farms, in the tunnel networks we had time to scatter before the swarm broke the main gates." Ward nodded, understanding, and quickly began to issue orders, splitting his team into smaller squads to search the key locations, knowing that time was limited because the more they moved, the more noise they made, and the more the swarm would notice. And already the air was vibrating with that strange, high-pitched chittering that meant the enemy was near. Corporal Ruiz led his team through the debris of what had once been a Valeri University, dodging collapsed beams and shattered glass, when a wall burst apart and a creature lunged, black limbs like sharpened blades, jaws split in 6 directions, eyes that glowed like dying stars. But the human soldier didn't hesitate, raising his rifle and unloading 2 bursts into the thing's chest, sending it crashing back with a scream of static and rage. And as more poured in behind it, the team fell into a defensive circle, laying down coordinated fire, grenades lighting up the hallways as the swarm was pushed back inch by inch. Across the city, similar scenes played out: gunfire, smoke, blood, but for every attack, the Deathworlders held firm, refusing to give ground, and as the swarm adapted, so did the humans, their armor shifting to resist the acid spit, their tactics adjusting on the fly, their will never bending, and slowly, through fire and sweat and gunpowder, they carved out small safe zones, pulling civilians into guarded areas where medics worked tirelessly to treat injuries using both human tech and Valeri knowledge, combining instincts and science in ways no one had tried before. As night fell, the survivors were moved to the remains of a hardened bunker beneath the central station, and Ward stood atop the rubble, watching the burning skyline, wondering how long they could hold out before the next wave came, when suddenly his communicator crackled with static, and then a voice came through Private Halen, from Squad 3, panting and urgent. "Sir, we found something under the archives, old Valeri tech, some kind of shield generator intact, might be able to power a perimeter field." Ward's eyes lit up, hope flickering where before there had been only grim determination, and he responded instantly, ordering a team to escort engineers to the location while he personally led a squad to reinforce the area. They reached the underground vault, half flooded and glowing faintly with green lights, where massive crystalline machinery lay dormant, untouched for centuries, forgotten as ancient history, and Rellen's voice shook with awe as he whispered, This was from the pre-stellar age. We always thought it was myth. But it's real, and if we can power it, maybe we can keep the swarm out, at least for a while." The engineers, human and Valeri alike, worked together without pause, connecting wires, translating symbols, using human tools and alien circuits until sparks flew and the entire chamber vibrated with energy, the shield humming to life with a soft, pulsing sound that resonated through the ruins above, forming an invisible dome around the survivors, temporary, but strong enough to block the swarm's approach for the night. When the attacks began again, they came harder and faster, as if the enemy sensed they were losing ground, hurling themselves at the shield in waves, screeching and clawing, shaking the barrier with each hit. But the humans held their line behind it, reinforcing the structure, launching counterattacks, dropping drones to monitor the battlefield, and even using sound traps to lure clusters of creatures away from the perimeter. Ward barely slept, moving from squad to squad, checking defenses, helping carry the wounded, sharing water and ration bars with Valeri children who had never seen a human before but now clung to their legs like lifelines. And through it all, the swarm never stopped coming. But neither did the Deathworlders, because they weren't here for a clean victory or glory. They were here because someone had cried out, and where others had turned away, they had come. And now the Valeri knew that humans were more than the wild species the galaxy whispered about. They were protectors, fighters, and survivors. And in the firelight of a dying world, they stood tall like giants, unbreakable, even as the darkness closed in around them. The shield over the bunker held through the night, its soft humming barely masking the sounds of claws, scraping, and alien shrieks echoing through the ruins. But when the first light of dawn broke across the skies of Valeri Prime, it revealed a nightmare that had only grown worse. Swarm bodies piled high at the edges of the barrier, twisted and steaming, while more creatures circled like predators, waiting for weakness. And inside the protective dome, the air was heavy with tension, exhaustion, and urgency. As Captain Elias Ward paced before the central command table made of scavenged metal, staring at a flickering holo map of the city, marking the last known survivor locations and the current positions of his scattered teams, knowing they couldn't stay trapped in one place forever. Their supplies were running low. Ammo stocks had taken a beating, medpacks were being used faster than they could be replaced, and although the shield had saved them for the night, its power source, a strange, crystalline Valeri relic, was unstable, slowly draining, humming louder with each hour as warning pulses vibrated through the stone. And Ward knew that if they didn't act fast, the dome would fall and leave everyone exposed. Still, he didn't panic, because panic was a luxury soldiers like him couldn't afford. And as he leaned over the table, Lieutenant Kira Dane entered with new intel. Drones had picked up signs of movement near the old transport depot on the north side of the city, and buried under it, based on the Valeri schematics, was an emergency power station, something from centuries ago that might still function if given a proper jumpstart. And Ward's mind immediately went to work, calculating risks, troop strength, and possibilities, then slammed his fist down and said, "We're going for it. We take Squad 1 and 2, sweep the depot, secure the power core, and reroute energy to the shield. If it works, we buy more time. If it doesn't, at least we go down fighting." No one argued, because the soldiers trusted him, and the Valeri had seen enough to know that when a Deathworlder made a Promise, they did everything to keep it, so within 30 minutes, 2 armored transports rumbled out of the bunker tunnels, moving low and fast through the debris-choked streets while overhead, drone scouts flitted between broken towers and blasted rooftops, scanning for swarm patrols. As they neared the depot, silence fell across the squad radios, not from fear, but from focus as the transports came to a halt near the outer wall of the depot, and soldiers disembarked quickly, weapons raised, eyes scanning shadows. Every motion precise and clean, until Private Lynn called out a warning movement on the roof, and in the next instant, a swarm ambush was triggered, with creatures leaping from the rubble, scuttling down walls, roaring from shattered windows, dozens of them at once, all sharp limbs and gaping mouths, and the humans opened fire immediately, bullets and energy rounds tearing through the monsters, grenades lighting up the alleys as the squad pushed forward in tight formation, never breaking line, never hesitating. The depot was a maze of rusted rails and collapsed platforms, but they fought their way through inch by inch, bodies and shells littering the ground behind them, until they reached the old sub-level hatch, where Kira and an engineer named Harkon worked together to override the lock, finally opening the way into a dark stairwell that led down into a forgotten part of Valeri Prime, lit only by flickering emergency lights and strange symbols etched into the walls, ancient Valeri language that spoke of danger, energy, and forgotten power. And as they moved deeper, it became clear that this was not just a power station, but something older, something built when Valeri Prime had been a center of science and advancement before the swarm ever arrived. At the heart of the chamber stood the energy core, tall, crystalline, pulsing faintly, with strange circuits still connected to the city's underground grid, and Harkon stepped forward, cautiously, muttering, "I think I can wake it up, but it'll need a charge, and the only thing we've got strong enough is the dropship's jump core." Ward wasted no time, calling in the dropship, which circled low despite incoming fire from swarm snipers, dropping the core like a bomb that shook the ground when it landed, and Harkon went to work splicing it into the system, hands moving fast, sparks flying as the core lit up brighter and brighter until the entire room vibrated with rising energy. And then the lights across the station flickered to life, and a deep humming spread across the city as ancient systems rebooted, pulsing out through the cables to the shield, which stabilized, strengthened, and began expanding its range, pushing the swarm back several hundred meters and giving the humans a much-needed breath of relief. But the victory was short, because even as the shield grew, the swarm adapted, changing tactics, splitting into multiple groups and using underground tunnels to circle the shielded zones, ambushing scout teams, and launching surprise strikes on supply convoys, and soon the humans found themselves fighting on multiple fronts with fewer resources and rising casualties. Still, they didn't retreat. Instead, they dug in deeper, building forward outposts in the ruins, setting up automated turrets and motion sensors, using captured swarm limbs to study weaknesses, and every soldier, every Valeri who could hold a weapon, took a stand, turning fear into fury and desperation into courage, with Ward leading every major charge, bleeding with his men, saving civilians with his own hands, and sending encrypted messages to the orbiting cruiser, resolute to request reinforcements, even if he knew they might not arrive in time. Days passed, filled with constant fighting, rebuilding, and loss. But something strange began to happen. The humans, with their brutal survival instincts and unshakable will, started to change the Valeri, inspiring them, showing them that even in the face of extinction, one could fight back. And slowly, engineers, medics, and even scholars joined the humans in the war effort, repairing old vehicles, crafting armor from broken tech, and helping the humans decode old systems that could turn the tide. One such breakthrough came when Relin, the young Valeri who first sent the distress signal, discovered an old planetary defense system hidden in a mountain base outside the capital, long deactivated, its controls locked behind ancient codes. But when Ward and his team arrived and began unlocking the facility, they realized that if they could bring the defense grid online, they might not just survive, they might actually take the planet back. However, the swarm knew something had changed, and their behavior grew more aggressive, more intelligent, and it became clear that there was something guiding them, not just a hive mind, but a central intelligence, a queen or a core, somewhere near the planetary chasm that had birthed the invasion, and if the humans wanted to win, they would have to strike not just the foot soldiers, but the heart of the swarm itself. As final preparations were made to activate the mountain defense grid, Captain Ward assembled every able fighter, human and Valerie alike, in the shadows of the half-buried base, and spoke simply, "This is it, we push now, or we lose everything. Valerie Prime is not dead, and we are not running today. We fight for the right of every world that has ever been ignored, for every call for help that was silenced. We answer it now with fire and steel." And with those words, the forces moved out, a mix of Deathworld soldiers and alien survivors who had seen the worst and still chose to stand, launching a multi-pronged assault across the city, one team to activate the grid, one to hold the shield perimeter, and one final team led by Ward himself to descend into the swarm's heart and strike the core, knowing that, if they failed, there would be no second chance. Deep beneath the ruined cities of Valerie Prime, where sunlight never reached and the air grew colder with every step, Captain Ward led his team through ancient tunnels that twisted like veins under the planet's surface, following old Valerie maps and scanner pings that showed movement far below them. Swarm lines, movement that didn't match any known pattern, and though they didn't speak much, the silence said everything. Each soldier knew they were not just heading into danger, they were heading into the unknown. And as the tunnels narrowed and thick web-like structures began lining the walls, the air turned thick with a strange hum that vibrated through their bones, and Kira whispered over comms, "We're close. I feel it," her voice tight, her grip on her weapon firmer than before, and Ward nodded silently, signaling for the squad to slow, every motion careful, because something was wrong. Too quiet, too still, no sign of swarm guards, no patrols, no resistance, and as they reached vast underground chamber lit by a sickly green glow pulsing from crystalline growths that jutted from the walls like teeth. They saw it massive, unmoving, coiled in the center like a sleeping serpent, a swarm biostructure, half machine, half organism, with thick cables plugged into the walls, drawing energy from the planet itself, and at its core was something none of them expected, a Valerie, still alive, encased in a transparent prison, wires connected to her skull and spine, her body barely breathing, and her eyes wide open, glowing faintly, locked in a trance. And Ward stepped closer, feeling a chill crawl up his spine, because he realized the truth: the Swarm Queen wasn't some giant insect or beast. It was this, a mind enslaved and twisted into a weapon. Valerie, who had once been like Relin, brilliant, full of hope, and now used to control the swarm like a puppet master from within the shadows. And before he could speak, the Valerie's eyes moved, locking onto his, and a voice filled his mind, not a scream, not a whisper, but a flood of emotions and broken memories, showing him how the swarm had arrived centuries ago and found her in a hidden lab, how they had torn her mind apart and fused it with their hive systems, how she had tried to resist, but failed, becoming their voice, their guide, their queen, not by choice, but by design. And as he stumbled back, the entire chamber came to life, walls shifting, creatures emerging from the dark. Not like the ones above, these were sleeker, faster, smarter, their eyes glowing with eerie awareness, and Ward shouted for the team to form up. Weapons raised as the creatures circled, watching, not attacking yet, as if waiting for a command, and suddenly the Valerie Queen spoke, not with her mouth, but through every wall, every creature, every heartbeat in the chamber. "You should not have come." And the swarm struck, fast and brutal, and the room became chaos. Bullets flying, blades clashing, blood and sparks painting the floor as Ward fought like a man possessed, driving back one after another while Kira and Harkon tried to reach the Queen's prison, hoping to disconnect her, free her, or end her if needed. And the closer they got, the more the creatures hesitated, their attacks slowing, as if uncertain, and Harkon yelled, "She's linked to them. If we break the link, we break the swarm." And Kira nodded, pulling out a high-voltage spike and jamming it into the base of the control node, sending a wave of energy surging through the chamber. And the Queen screamed, not in pain, but in hope, and the creatures staggered, shrieking, flailing, and Ward pushed through the chaos, reaching the prison wall just as it began to crack, and through it, the Queen whispered, "Help me end this." And without hesitation, He raised his blade and drove it into the power node, severing the final connection, and the chamber exploded in light, the swarm convulsing and collapsing like puppets with cut strings, the biostructure groaning as its supports failed. Ward grabbed the queen's body as it fell from the shattered prison, lifeless but peaceful, and ran, the team covering their retreat as the tunnels crumbled behind them, sealing the enemy's heart in. A tomb of stone and fire, and as they emerged back into the light above, bruised, bloodied, but alive, the sky was clearing, and the swarm above was faltering, scattering, as if the storm had finally passed. But Ward looked back once more, knowing the war was not over, but the enemy hidden in the dark had been found and defeated. The news of what happened on Valeri Prime spread across the galaxy like wildfire, first through whispers, and then through official reports, but even the most detailed broadcasts could not fully capture the shock of it, how a forgotten world, once left to die beneath the claws of the swarm, had not only survived, but stood victorious, thanks to the actions of a single human warship and a team of Deathworlders who answered a signal no one else had dared to hear. And now, across peaceful worlds and powerful empires, questions were being asked that no one had dared speak aloud before. Because if humans could do this, arrive from the far edges of space, fight monsters bred for annihilation, uncover a secret hidden beneath layers of deception, and destroy the heart of a nightmare, then what else were they capable of? And the Galactic Council met in urgency, delegates from hundreds of species gathering in orbit above them. Core world of Arsalon, faces pale and uncertain, reading and rereading the final transmission sent by Captain Ward's crew. A transmission not just of facts, but of footage, battle records, sensor logs, and the haunting final image of the Valeri Queen, once a brilliant scientist turned living weapon, freed at last by the very species the galaxy still called too dangerous. And debates raged over long tables, some saying the humans were a threat, others calling them saviors, and still others asking the most important question of all: why had the humans answered when everyone else turned away? And the answer lay in a single line spoken by Ward himself, now played in 1,000 languages on news feeds and forums across the stars. We don't ignore people who ask for help. Because one day, that could be us. And this line struck deeper than any weapon, reminding all who heard it that the humans, born on a hostile world where survival demanded cooperation and courage, did not fear the unknown. They ran toward it, and slowly, the galaxy began to change, not just in politics, but in perspective. Worlds that once looked down on humans now looked to them for guidance. Empires that once dismissed Deathworlders now sent ambassadors to Earth, trying to understand them. Strange mix of kindness and ferocity that had led them to Valeri Prime, and among the Valeri survivors, now rebuilding with human assistance, stories were told to their young about the Terran Thunder, the ship that came when no one else did, and the people who never gave up. And Captain Ward, though he refused medals and fame, was invited to speak at the new council chamber built in orbit above Valeri, where he stood not as a conqueror, but as a man with a message, and he spoke simply, telling the galaxy that the real war had never just been about the swarm. It had been about fear, fear of getting involved, fear of risk, fear of sacrifice, and that humans, for all their flaws, had simply chosen to be brave. And though not every species agreed, and some still whispered of caution, the balance had shifted, and alliances began to form not out of fear, but out of trust, and military doctrines were rewritten, training programs revised, and the word Deathworlder slowly changed in meaning not a threat, but a title of respect. And on Earth, where the skies once seemed so far away, children now played with toy warships modeled after the Terran Thunder, and museums displayed fragments of swarm armor. Beside the helmet of a Valeri scientist whose face was now remembered not in shame, but as a symbol of what was lost and what was saved, and as peace slowly returned and new threats stirred in the void, one truth remained clear in every history book, every strategic command center, and every heart that remembered the day Valeri Prime was saved. When the galaxy turned its back, the Deathworlders stepped forward, and that changed everything.